Welcome back to Ether Hour, everybody. I am your host, Conrad Franz, joined as always by Dmitry Kaligin and a special guest who I will have Dmitry introduce in one moment. We are going to be discussing the current state of Russia, the monarchist movements within Russia, what it is like in Russia to be of the Orthodox monarchist persuasion, how the current Russian political milieu views Soviet revivalism, the memory of Tsar Nicholas II and his martyrdom, the future of monarchism, imperialism, the favorable view of the Russian Empire in Russia is currently faring right now, discussing all of this and a bunch of other issues that I know many of our audience is curious about. So Ivan here is a fantastic person to discuss this with. So Dmitry, how are you doing? Would you mind introducing our fantastic guest to our audience today?
Of course, Conrad, I'm very excited to be here. And of course, our esteemed guest, and I say esteemed, of course, because Ivan Yurievich Vorobievsky is well known for producing very based, patriotic, and Orthodox Christian content. And it's rare that you get all three in one, especially in today's modern internet. And we'll speak about censorship in the Russian Federation today, of course, and how certain subjects are not, cannot be spoken about. But Ivan Vorobievsky comes from a very well-established Orthodox Christian family. His father is, well, for better or for worse, a great celebrity in Russia for making great documentary films about Mount Athos, about the future of Russia, Orthodox Christian prophecy. In some regards, he was making World War Now content before World War Now was even around. And in a lot of respects, many things that I say on this show have been inspired by Ivan Yurievich's father, Yuri Vorobievsky. And so it's very interesting to have his very talented son on, who in his own right has created amazing content on both Telegram, YouTube, and other platforms. And essentially him being the same age as us, having this amazing Moscow-based content creator on to talk about all the most important subjects to us on the 8th hour episode was the thing that we were looking forward to for months now, trying to set this up. So we're finally here. And Ivan Yurievich, it's good to have you. Thank you very much for taking the time and speaking to us. How are you doing?
Thank you for inviting, and thank you. You presented me so cool. I even get a bit shy, but I'm happy to be here. Finally, we wanted to talk with each other a long time ago, so finally I'm here, and let's start our conversation about points which can be even so unexpected for any Western followers, for Western people who will listen us, because I know many of them have a very the image our situation in Russia not so correctly. Some of them think the traditional modern Russian Federation is a defender of traditional values of Christianity, it's conservative, and so far. But today I suppose some of them, yet it's not clear at all. Maybe I will disappoint somebody, so I hope they forgive me for this. So let's start.
Excellent. Ivan Yurievich, I think many of our audience will probably understand that, you coming from such a background, even as a child, you've been attending right-wing Orthodox Christian patriotic lectures along with your dad for years now. So you've seen and met many of the great celebrities who've investigated the ritual murder of Tsar Nicholas II, people like Leonid Bolotin, Mikhail Nazarov, Vladimir Osipov, etc. You've met them all in person at some point, even in your childhood and in your teenage years. You know the right wing in Russia, the true Orthodox Christian, even I would say monarchist right wing, very well from the inside. And I think the best thing you can do is give our audience your most honest, unfiltered opinion. And of course, they can, process that because our listeners are actually quite smart and well-educated. I just wanted to mention Ivan Yurievich. The first thing I guess we'll start off with is you mentioned briefly censorship in Russia. We're aware of the criminal article 282 of the Russian Criminal Code, which essentially bans all kinds of forms of hate speech, and not just calls to violence, but essentially calls to collective hatred of some sort against particular groups of people. Now, this Article 282 in Russia has recently, especially about a month ago now, been criminalized, which means that for anyone who makes racist, weird remarks, or that can be deemed as racist or anti-Semitic or not politically correct, they can go to prison. And we cover this on our show. However, it'd be interesting to hear your opinion. What is freedom of speech like in Russia, especially for right-wing Russians? Because we understand left-wing, again, to international agents, putting all that aside, for right-wing conservative Orthodox Christians, how is freedom of speech in Russia, and how does Article 282 relate to all of this? If you can break this down for us.
As I said previously, the Russian alt-right, right activists, monarchists, conservatives is a mostly persecuted political group in the country. So even liberals, leftists, LGBTQ groups, even they are not so persecuted in Russia like we are. Maybe, as I said previously, it was shocking information for somebody, but it's true. And this criminal article 282, it has a very interesting story. Let me tell something about its creator. It has two most famous people who became so-called fathers of this article. One of them, the deputy of Russian parliament, Ilya Ponomarev, he has a liberal views, and when he was a deputy, he initiated this project called this law in Gosduma. So it's a Russian parliament name, if somebody doesn't know. And he claimed this article has a goal to fight right-wing extremism, anti-Semitism, racial riots, and another horrible things which left-wing propaganda usually trying to scare the people. After election in Russian parliament in 2016, Ilya Ponomarev wasn't re-elected. He left Russia. Now he lives in America, as I remember. But
wow.
this article still exists, and it serves for persecution of dissidents, of people who, firstly, it was used just against Russian nationalists, right-wing conservatives, and so forth. But later, this criminal article became reason for persecution of even liberal protest movement in Russia. So we can say that liberals created a weapon which beats themselves later. We have in Russia we have, as we say here, не рой яму для другого, сам в нее попадешь. It means don't make a trap for another people because you'll be catched by it yourself. And second creator of this article, also deputy from ruling party Единая Россия, Unity Russia, so-called. It's a very interesting party because he has no any understandable ideology, but he has the most mandates in Russian parliament, and it's a very comfortable for who nowadays regime because it helps to collect the people who has any moral views and who prepare to make any ugly and horrible things to get the power. So the second creator, deputy from this party, is Mr. Spiegel.
Boris
I
Spiegel.
don't know.
Yes.
Let me remember how his first name. It was too many years ago. So yeah, Boris Spiegel, ethnical Jew, and previously he was accused with the pedophile crime. He was even imprisoned, as I remember. But after he was released, it doesn't prevent him to become a deputy, to sit in the parliament and make any laws, as in this case. So we have two. This article, as I say, have two creators. One of them is Jewish pedophile, and second, the liberal who doesn't live in Russia, and mostly Ilya Ponomarev nowadays he supported the collaboration military organization who fight on the Ukrainian side against Russia, so-called Legion of Free Russia and Russian Voluntary Corps. It consists of traitors who also escaped from Russia, and now they directly supported our enemies, and even they even make some terrorist attacks, terrorist assaults against Russian territory. They took off the hostage on Russian territory. They made really war crimes against Russian innocent people. And Ilya Ponomarev now is like a boss for them. He he helped he helps them to get aid. He find out the sponsors for them, and that's all you need to know about this man. So this criminal article, this really anti-Russian law, which was created for persecution of the dissidents, it's still working. And by the way, let me say about one example of the persecution in this article. Famous Russian nationalist Dmitry Demishkin, who led the Russian right-wing movement in end of the zero years, in first half of it was one of the most famous leader of Russian nationalists before 2015 when he was arrested. He was accused with so-called incitement of the inter-ethnical violence in Russia, and it became for one of his state. He said Russian power for Russia, and he was after this he was accused as a horrible racist, chauvinist, and so forth, because the prosecutor office decided his statement is something like hate speech. They say he provokes racial hatred and inter-ethnical hatred with the statement. And he was imprisoned for a few years. By the way, he was imprisoned not in common prison. He was in a special prison where a real terrorist, real killers, and real dangerous criminal are imprisoned. And he was put to the place with all these people just for what he said. After this article was partially criminalized in 2018, Demishkin was released. But nowadays, in 2025, this article become harder again, and now we can expect everything from our glorious state because they prefer not persecute a real terrorist. They don't want to forbid niqabs, and they don't want to persecute a real extremist Islamist groups in Russia who promote hatred, religious violence. Uh, as you probably know, not so far away, the Taliban, Afghanistan Mujahideen was officially claiming Russia as non-terrorist organization. Now they kind of our partners and all our neighbors, and we, as Russian official says, we need to exchange the positive experience with them. I don't know what they're talking about. What experience do maybe they about beating women with stones? Or what they're talking about at all? But in the same time, we have very big attention from federal security service, from Ministry of Internal Affairs, from counter-extremist center, at all this big, almost all of them prepare to persecute Russian conservatives, Russian right-wing activists, and we really get it every day. By the way, as you know, probably in Russia, Muslim minorities, not native Muslim people from Russia.
Immigrants,
I say about migrants who promoted the buildings and new mosques in Russia. One of them is they want to build one of them in Russian city Perm, and local civils and local Muslims from native folks too. They wasn't so happy about this. They start to protest. They producing the campaign again is building this mosque, new mosque in the city, because everybody knows if it appears, it means a huge number of migrants will come to their neighborhoods. It's of course it will lead to extremely growth of criminal rates, and nobody wanted it happens. One of the leader of folks protests is famous Permian activist Roman Yushkov. He was accused with this criminal article for a few times already, because he stated against migrant crimes in Perm, because of his statement against. Let me. I will some interrupted. Sorry. I want to the things I want to talk about is very fun fact. One time, Roman Yushkov was accused for incitement or the hatred to the social group, the homosexuals. So really, they persecute them. Russian prosecutor office in Perm persecute them for his disliking the LGBTQ, and this takes place. It takes place in a country where LGBTQ propaganda is allegedly forbidden, but in the same time we have these ridiculous results. That's the thing you need to know about the freedom of speech in Russia for Russian patriotic movement.
I've heard some of these things and it makes sense. And I've seen, you see patriots like Igor Strelkov as well, even though it was under more military legislation against, talking negatively about the military and the SMO that landed him in prison. It's clear that you're right, that one of the most persecuted groups in Russia is unfortunately those that find themselves, I guess what you would describe, to the right of the average united Russia member. But I guess from a more political perspective, from the average Russian on the ground, Ivan, it seems to me that with what you're describing, with these multiculturalism laws, in favor of these sorts of things, sort of placating the Muslim minority within Russia, we know that there's, Dagestan, Chechnya, there's huge, and then these migrants, there's pretty large Muslim populations in Russia. But what it sounds like to me is that the Russian state is more afraid of these Muslim or even liberal minorities potentially rising up than they are of any kind of, resistance for, or, any kind of, not even resistance, just kind of political dissent from traditional Russians, traditional Christian Russians, Russian nationalists. So, I mean, how many people in Russia are of the Russian nationalist persuasion? And as the war effort has been going as well, have you noticed an increase in Russian nationalist, patriotic, or even sort of Orthodox, traditional, Orthodox nationalist sentiment? I would love to hear your thoughts on both of those questions.
Hello, a very long question. I don't even know what to start first. But fortunately, I need to agree with the statement about a Russian official who mostly afraid with Russian nationalist groups and defenders of traditional values. And unfortunately, Russian government thinks these people, the people of the traditional views, which we carrying, they are more dangerous for the state than tens of millions foreign migrants with another culture, with very who doesn't respect our laws, our traditions, and you also noticed Igor Strelkov, who was imprisoned in last year, and this situation shows a real disaster which we have in Russia. If somebody doesn't know, Igor Strelkov is the leader of Russian resistance in Novorossiya, who started the Russian Liberation Rebellion in east of Ukraine, in Donbass, and who protected Donetsk and other Donbass people from new powers which made a coup d'etat in Ukraine, and who tried to erase everything Russian from Ukrainian territory. So we need to be grateful to Igor Strelkov because he started, saved 1,000 and even maybe hundreds of thousand lives. But then in 2014, he didn't get any real help and aid from Russia. He was forced to leave the Donetsk People Republic. He was a defense minister of it. And actually, Russian officials directly said to him that if he will not leave, if he doesn't leave the Donbass, to be imprisoned, and Donetsk and Lugansk People Republics will not get any help, even humanitarian help aid from Russia.
So they blackmailed him, basically.
Yeah, yes, and they forced it to leave the Donbass, but Russian authorities probably, Kremlin authorities probably hoped that he will keep silent, but he didn't. He said he have spoken truth about real situation, about treachery of Russian national interests by Russian Federation elites, and as a result, he was accused like as extremist, and he was imprisoned for 4 years. And again, it was a case of persecution for his views, for his decision to be honest, to not keep silent. Don't even know how I can describe this situation when many many oligarchs from 90s who are robbed to Russia, who got millions and billions rubles with criminal way, and some of them like Mikhail Friedman even sponsored Ukrainian armed forces.
Oh, wow.
But despite of this, Friedman isn't persecuted. He is totally in safety. There is no any questions to him. But Igor Strelkov is imprisoned. By the way, when special military operation started, Strelkov makes at least 2 attempts to arrive to the front line and join Russian army. But Russian special forces and special securities didn't let him to do this. In August of 2014, he was even caged. He was caught in Crimea when Strelkov have making a new attempt to arrive in the army, and they didn't let him to show his country. They tried to force him to keep silent, and now he put him in a prison. I don't know how even it be could commented because it's something.
Yeah, this is tragic. Yeah. It doesn't even feel right because it's not like Igor Strelkov was even an atheist or a communist or, he was an Orthodox Christian. He protected. Yeah.
Yes, he was a Russian monarchist, and he stands there. I'm sure.
And he was also giving speeches at the, Slaviansky Fond, the Slavic Foundation Hall in Moscow with your dad, with Mikhail Nazarov, Vladimir Osipov. Like, these are people who sat in prison during Soviet times. Vladimir Osipov, for example, for being dissidents against the Soviet Union. These are like almost confessors, like ispovedniki. And Strelkov was with them in 2014-15 giving speeches, presentations there. This is someone absolutely who is a Russian Orthodox Christian monarchist and also a military hero, a hero of Russia. He served his country. So you're completely right.
Yes, and as a gratitude, he got this persecution. And when the common Russian people see this, they start to think, do they need to fight for this country if we can get the same gratitude as a result? So it's not just injustice, it also, не знаю, как сказать, подрывает дух, моральный дух.
It undermines the patriotic spirit of the entire country, basically.
Yes.
Yep.
I forgot the words.
No, absolutely. No, thank you for covering that. We try to speak about it as often as possible. Unfortunately, I think Strelkov's sentence ends in 2027 or 2028. Very long, unjustifiably so, for social media posts as well, which again plays into the whole censorship discussion. Now, I think what's interesting, Ivan Yurievich, when we talk about the general cultural context, we have this strange reliance. If you think about it, the modern Russian elites, so not all the Russian people, of course, but just the elites at the very top, including a lot of the still oligarchs, Rosenbergs, Friedman, Arvin, all these colorful characters, Abramovich, etc. So all these colorful people in charge of, especially economic, Potanyan, for example, right? Recently receiving the St. Alexander Nevsky Award, unfortunately. Very interesting cases, but these people, it doesn't appear that they like pre-revolutionary Russia. They seem to rely not just on Orthodox Christianity. For them, they see Russia as a secular, multi-confessional, multinational, essentially like a new sort of Soviet Union. That's what it appears to be like. And potentially, unfortunately, even the Russia they seem to be building, even with the liberated territories, it seems to be they're not building a monarchist Russia of the future. Like, монархию они не будут восстановлять. То есть it's completely, they're building a different project. And we know, of course, you know exactly, Ivan Yurievich, there was at least 2 prophecies from saints and elders of the Russian Orthodox Church that said that if the Russian Orthodox people do not repent, communism will come back. And maybe in the 90s it would seem silly and, what communism, like Zyuganov, right? It's silly, it's stupid. But now we see essentially like a quasi, semi-social, like weird revivalism that's taking place. And the elites at the top, they're not becoming more orthodox. Maybe they're sponsoring the building of different churches and monasteries, like projects, right? Cultural projects, like museums. But spiritually speaking, their children aren't on the front lines. Like yourself, you served for a few months in the drone forces, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a different mindset. So maybe you can comment on that. The elites, what you think, as a regular Russian content creator in Moscow, what do you think the elites, what is their spiritual, какие их, скажем, духовные скрепы, if they're not Orthodox?
Absolutely agree with you. They're not gonna rebuild a Russian empire. Of course, they remember Soviet Union. This model is more comfortable for them. Of course, they are not communists. They doesn't believe the communist ideals and beliefs. They doesn't follow the capital, and they didn't even read it. But yeah, they prefer this multi-confessional, multicultural, multi-racial model of the secular state, not just because it's a Soviet heritage, but also because they see this all around the world, at least in European countries with with a hard globalist agenda. So this way is more easy for these elites, and the simplest and easier way for them is raise the red flags and Soviet symbol and another Soviet symbolic, and rename Russian streets in Russian cities with the in honor of famous communists. And we faced a really ridiculous situation, as you probably know. In after 2014, after revolution in Ukraine, the new authorities provided so-called decommunization in Ukraine, but as a part of this decommunization, many Russian monuments of Russian emperors, Russian famous people, poets, and another famous person who, of course, cannot be a communist. But all these monuments was ruined. In 2022, Ukrainian barbarians ruined the monument of Saint Prince Alexander Nevsky in Kharkov, and they call this decommunization. But of course, some real communist toponyms and names of the city were cancelled while this decommunization too. As example, the city Bakhmut in Donbass. After 2023, it was under the control of the Ukrainian powers, and in 2015, this city changed his Soviet name and got back his historical name, Bakhmut. It was a name which famous from Russian Tsar Ivan IV. Somebody calls him Ivan the Terrible, but he was terrible just for Russian enemies of Russia. So, if translate this word in Russia, we call him Ivan Grozny, and if we translate his name correctly, it will be sound as like Ivan the Thunderous. So, since his since 16th century, this city had name Bakhmut. In the time of the Bolsheviks coup d'etat, when they captured the power in former Russian Empire, they of course rename many of Russian cities, and Bakhmut get the name Artyom. But who was this so-called comrade Artyom? It was a very interesting person. Firstly, he was a really crazy man. He was he was mentally ill, and he was in the beginning of the 20th century. He was in Kharkov's psychical hospital, не знаю, как сказать, психушка.
Yeah, basically like a psych ward. Yeah, Kharkov had a very famous psych ward back in the Russian Empire.
Thank you so much for listening to the free preview of this Ether Hour episode. If you want to get behind the paywall and hear the rest of this discussion with Ivan Vorobievsky, a fantastic Russian patriot, Orthodox nationalist, somebody with an extensive knowledge of the things we discuss here on the show. Of course, behind that paywall, we get into the ritual regicide of Tsar Nicholas II, what really went on there, and how that goes against certain mainstream narratives popular in Russia. We talk about prophecies, about the return of the Tsar, as well as the potential return of a communist Soviet Union. Ivan really breaks this down. We talk obviously about the revival of the Soviet Union and communist utopianism and ideology that is unfortunately rearing its head again in Russia. We talk about all of this on top of some other things. So it's a really good perspective into what it is like to be a patriot, a nationalist, a real Orthodox Christian within the Russian Federation today, not, just some secular person or some MAGA communist or some nonsense like this. So really great interview with Ivan. Hopefully we can collaborate with him in the future. And again, get behind that paywall. You don't just get access to this episode and the rest of it, but hundreds of other episodes at this point, hours and hours of content. You get access to our Death of Empire documentary, over 4.5 hours of subtitled, incredible historical content for the first time in English. So get behind that paywall and check it out. And we will see you on the other side. God bless.